Hey guys, my name is Cameron and this video is to share my experience as a living kidney donor. I went through the entire process here in North Texas, so this is all through Baylor Scott & White Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. An amazing experience, great people there that I worked with the entire time. Made me feel super comfortable through the entire process. And this video is to share my experience. This is solely my experience. This is not to say that your experience or whoever you're looking this video up for, this will be their experience. This is just something I wanted to provide out there for anyone looking up information as far as being a living kidney donor. The reason I wanted to be a living kidney donor was I had a relative who was looking for a kidney donation. They were on the transplant list, and you can be on the transplant list for years and never receive a transplant. There are thousands and thousands of people on this list, and some people go the rest of their life and never get a transplant. It was important to me to see if I could help out my relative. I had a grandparent years ago who went through dialysis, which is basically mechanically filtering your blood because your kidney no longer can do it. And took a huge toll on my grandparent. And not only does it take a toll on the person receiving dialysis, it takes a huge toll on family members or friends or loved ones to transport them and to go through the process with them. It takes hours and hours. It's a huge burden, not only on the person who needs the kidney or dialysis, but on people around them. So that is why I felt the calling basically inside me to look into donating my kidney. The entire process takes months, so it's not a quick process. There's lots of testing, and going into this, I was not a kind of person that ever went to the doctor. I'm a pretty healthy person, but I didn't do a lot of blood tests or basically any of that kind of stuff going into this. So the entire process made me a little nervous and anxious. It's just part of the process, and being willing to help is something that I had to accept. Basically, this started back around the 1st of July. Whenever I first submitted my application online, process I'm wanting to say took somewhere around 30 minutes. It's basic questions. So once I found that my blood type matched and I got on and filled out this application, it was a few days later I was contacted back through the coordinator for Baylor Scott & White that everything looked pretty good with my application, and I moved on to the next step. That next step was to have basically the recipient's insurance accept me as a potential candidate to donate. And a huge factor in this is nothing came out of pocket for me or my insurance. I never once showed an insurance card through this entire process. It was 100% free. I never spent anything for this process. This all was done through the recipient's insurance. This was actually one of the longest wait periods I had through this whole process. It took several weeks to be accepted. Once accepted from them, now we went from basically the 1st of July to the end of July. Once accepted, I went through the first round of testing, which was basically a 24-hour urine sample where I was required to pee into a container that Baylor Scott & White sent me through the mail. Simple process for me as a male to urinate into this jug for 24 hours. Then I took that jug to a lab and turned it into them to have tested. And while there, I also did blood tests. Like I said, moving into this, I never had done much testing at all in my life, so was a little anxious about doing blood tests. And you're going to do lots of blood tests through this process. It was something I was anxious about, but it turned out to not really be a huge deal. Yeah, so the first blood test was just 4, 5, 6 vials of blood, turned in the urine sample, and that was sent off. Then I received information back from Baylor Scott & White and the coordinator that everything came back fine, and now it was time to schedule basically what's like a big day of testing. And this is where I went to Baylor Scott & White Hospital and spent most of a day there. And this is where there's a lot more testing done. There's a lot of information given from me through small interviews I did with surgeons and social workers and different people, coordinators at the hospital. Also, it was a chance for them to give me a lot of information about the process of the surgery and what that would look like for me. Basically, by this point, it was toward the end of August. So I went and did this 1-day interview and testing. And this is something that I went and did by myself, but I would suggest bringing along a wife or spouse or someone who's going through this process with you. But I went by myself, and that was totally my decision. I went through a lot of this by myself, 100% my decision. Obviously, you are able to share this with as many people as you would like. I decided for me personally, I wanted to go through this process and not tell a lot of people about it. And I think for me, it was more about that I was nervous that this whole process or experience was on me, and I didn't want to mess it up in any way. I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up, have something happen, whether a medical thing through testing or a choice that I made or anything like that. I didn't want to have to explain to people why the process didn't go through, but obviously, you are more than able to share this with as many people as you want if you need that support system. Through the 1-day experience there at Baylor Scott and White, I got there early in the morning, parked, went in, and first off was lots more blood testing. This was more blood probably than I had ever given or had tested in my life. And so that made me a little bit anxious. And I will say going into this entire day, I was very anxious. They do blood pressure testing, and I had to have my blood pressure taken several times just to make sure that I didn't have blood pressure. I've never had a problem with that in my life. It did read a little high, but that was just being anxious for the day basically. And so once I went through part of the day and calmed down just a little bit, everything was fine with my blood pressure. Had that not have happened, if my blood pressure had remained high, they would have sent me home with a 24-hour blood pressure monitor that would have also went into it. Obviously, for the transplant, they're wanting people as healthy as possible. There are tons of factors that go into it, and I couldn't tell you 100% of what they are. Basically, you need to be pretty healthy to be able to donate, and I feel like that I'm that way, but I took it on myself going into this process that I was going to get as healthy as possible. So eating as good as I could, lost some weight. I drank pretty regularly going into this, and that's not to say that I quit drinking going into this, but I definitely drank less, going from multiple times a week down to maybe once every couple weeks through this process. That's just something that I chose to do, and that was to be as healthy as possible going into all this testing, so that there was no choice that I made that would affect the outcome of any of this testing that I did. And then toward the end of the day, I did do an MRI, and they put me inside the little machine and they pump the dye through me, and that was a whole different experience. It wasn't really that bad of a process. After that day, that was basically it, and I went home and waited for the results of all those tests. So after the big day of testing and getting my acceptance letter, the next part of the process was to set up for my recipient and for myself to both go have our blood tested around the same time. Both of us had to give blood within 24 hours of each other, and there was a little bit of a delay here because of work obligations, but once we did that and everything came back good, we were to the part of the process where they were ready to schedule the actual transplant surgery. This is 100% based on my schedule. I could have scheduled it as early as a couple weeks. Start of the process was 1st of July, and we ended up scheduling it for mid to late October. Then basically we were waiting a few weeks for the surgery, set up everything through work to be off, insurance to go on short-term disability. So I was not being paid through my work for my days that I was going to be off after my transplant, but was on a short-term disability. Do know there is a program where if you make a certain amount of money or less, you are able to get on this assistance program where they help provide financial assistance for someone who's donating. I didn't qualify for that, but just know that is an option. If being off work is the main thing that's keeping you away from doing this, just know there are other avenues to where can have financial assistance. So don't let that be the one determining factor for you donating or not. So once we set up the transplant date, then finally, this is where it all comes together and information is shared to my recipient that they have a donor. So it was on me to talk to my recipient outside of the whole donation process. Do know that it is possible for you to not share any information with your recipient, and this is the part of the whole process where they finally find out that they are going to get a transplant and they get the date. They are ready for the surgery based on my schedule. So moving into surgery time, we did one more blood test a couple days right before just to make sure everything's still good to go. And then we were ready for day of surgery. All right, so day of surgery. This is the main event, and this is the day that you and your recipient are actually going to be in the same place at the same time. Although because of the way Baylor Scott & White did it, I never actually saw my recipient at all until after the surgery. And that is because me as the donor, I showed up a couple hours before the recipient's scheduled surgery. That way my surgery could start, and if anything went wrong, they wouldn't have already started the recipient's surgery. Basically, they get into my surgery, all's going well, start the recipient's surgery, and then everything lines up. They take the kidney out of me and they take it over to the recipient whenever they are ready for it. All right, so day of surgery, I showed up around 5 a.m. Because Baylor Scott & White does multiple kidney donation surgeries on their day that they do it. They schedule theirs for every 2 weeks. I believe they did 3 donation surgeries the same day as mine, including mine. So they did a deceased donor where someone died and they took that kidney and gave it to someone on the transplant list. Then they did my scheduled one, and then there was someone else who was scheduled for after us. Showed up early in the morning, did registration, went in and had my stomach shaved. My surgery was a laparoscopic surgery, which was done basically by the surgeon, but with assistance from a robot. I got 3 small incisions on my abdomen, less than 1 inch. That's for the robot's arms to go through. And then basically what looks like a C-section incision. So got my stomach all shaved up, in my gown, everything ready to go, and then was moved back to, I guess, what you would call pre-op, getting IVs. Lots of people coming in, talking, the anesthesiologist, surgery team, surgeon, lots of people coming in and talking with me, getting me ready to go. Basically, up until this point in the entire process, I could have backed out of the surgery. They make sure you know this all the way through the whole transplant process, that you can decide at any point that, hey, I don't want to do this, and you are not committed to this. So basically, up until the point of them putting the mask on my face and knocking me out, I could have said, hey, I don't want to do this. I would have not been obligated to move forward with the surgery. At this point, say my goodbye to my wife. She went to the waiting room and wheeled back into surgery. Basically, all I remember is moving over onto the operating table, asking the surgery team, hey guys, can you all take a picture of my kidney? I'd love to see that. And then they put the mask over my face to knock me out. Take some deep breaths, and that was basically all I remember. I was put basically all the way out for this through anesthesia. Had my surgery. It lasted for, I think I went into surgery around 7:30ish. By the time I came out of surgery and was back into a normal hospital room, I think was around 1:30. So pretty long process. The surgery went well. Apparently I don't take anesthesia real well. I had a lot of nausea coming out of that. Had I known prior to it going in, I could have let the anesthesiologist know, and I believe there's some stuff they could have given me to help fight the nausea. This is the first time that I had been knocked all the way out like this. So had a lot of nausea, and I threw up several times over several hours coming out of the surgery. And that was the main negative thing that I dealt with while in the hospital. I ended up staying in the hospital for 1 night. Surgery happened early on a Wednesday morning, and I got out of the hospital late afternoon on Thursday. They say about 50% of the people stay that one night and then into the next day, and 50% of the people stay 2 nights and then into the Friday. So I was ready to go because in the hospital, there is basically someone coming in every hour and they're doing some sort of test or talking to you. I was required to have a catheter, so there's a catheter left in after the surgery, and they're checking my urine. That was kind of uncomfortable to have that in, and I would say besides getting sick, the catheter was definitely the worst part. That was one of the things I was most nervous about, was getting the catheter taken out, because you're fully awake for that. People who have had a catheter probably realize that it's not that big of a deal, but and they said guys usually are a little stressed about this. I was nervous about getting the catheter taken out. I will say on the Thursday, whenever it was taken out, that was not comfortable at all. It only lasts for a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds is the process of having it taken out, but it's not a super comfortable process. They do want you up moving around, so I never was able to get up the day of my surgery. I believe some people that night, say that Wednesday night, may get up and walk around, but that Thursday morning, early a.m., I was up walking around. I am a big time walker. I walk a lot in my daily life. It was kind of crazy to me just how hard it was to be up moving around. So every little bit in the hospital, every couple hours, I was up walking around. You're not walking far, but you are up moving, and that is something that they really push, is they want you up and moving around. One of the main things that I dealt with after surgery was pain from the gas that they pump into you for the laparoscopic surgery. I had a little bit of pain, obviously bloating in my stomach, because that gas is trapped inside of you. A little bit of that while I was at the hospital. Had my wife drive me home. We got home on that Thursday night actually, and then Friday I was in a lot of pain from not the incisions, but from the leftover gas in my body after surgery. I had a lot of pain up in my shoulders, which was gas that was actually trapped. I mean, that it moves freely in your body. And that is something I dealt with for several days. Never thought that that would be a side effect or anything that would cause me problems, but that was probably the biggest thing I dealt with after surgery, was several days of gas pain. My incisions were covered up. Basically, they're stitched from the inside, and then they were covered with a kind of glue on the outside. So I didn't really see much besides the glue on my incisions. I leave the hospital like that. Your incisions are basically waterproof. You're able to take a shower. They just don't want you to take baths and be fully submerged, but take showers, and they just asked that I didn't scrub the glue off or anything like that. Leave the glue there. Glue stayed with me for a couple weeks leading up to my first doctor visit. 2 weeks later I was still in contact with my coordinator. She checked in on me. If I had had anything wrong, I would have been able to go back to the hospital, and they would have looked into anything I had wrong. Once again, free of charge. That's all still part of the whole process. I didn't personally have anything going on besides the pain from the gas. And then over the next couple of weeks, the only real side effect I had was sharp pains, I could tell inside me. Obviously, you had some stuff moved around. I would also feel lightheaded whenever I stood up after sitting down or laying down a lot, which you do because over the first week you're not able to move around quite like you normally would. So I went to my doctor's appointment a couple weeks later and was able to drive myself. Basically at this doctor's appointment, that is where if I had a desk job, I would have been able to go back to work. But since I work in like a manual labor job, they ask that you stay off work for 4 to 6 weeks. At my 2-week appointment, I met with my surgeon and coordinators, basically made sure everything was good. I'm a month out from my surgery now and pretty much back to normal. My incisions looked even better. They looked as good as I can possibly imagine, something I was nervous about. Just know everybody's body type's different, and I would say my incisions looked better than I could imagine. Basically, the 3 smaller ones I have, you can't even really hardly see, and once my stomach hair grows back in, they'll basically be covered, and then the one that's down low is covered by a swimsuit. I'm doing well. Everything through the entire process went really well. I will say that the surgeons, it's their job to give you all the scenarios that could happen, things that could go wrong. So you get a lot of doom and gloom of things that could happen. But the likelihood of that happening is very low, and they will throw that in there after they tell you all the bad stuff that could happen. The likelihood of it happening is very low. What I'm looking at the rest of my life, how my life has changed or will change, is there's not a lot of change that happens to me as a living kidney donor or as someone who just going about my daily life. I don't notice any difference in my daily life so far, other than I'm off work now, but once I'm back at work, everything should be fine. Basically, I'm required to take care of myself. So it's just more added motivation to stay healthy, not be overweight, stay active, just general health things that we should all be doing anyway in our everyday lives. And then stay hydrated is a big one. One thing I've been doing is drinking from something like this that has like measurements on the sides to where I can keep up with how much water I'm drinking. The other big thing they tell you several times is you won't really be able to take like ibuprofen and certain types of pain medication, which I never took prior to the surgery, so it's not a big change in my life. You are able to take Tylenol, whatever way that Tylenol is different than ibuprofen, you are able to take Tylenol. As far as my actual kidney function, what information was passed on to me is a person is born with about 4 times as much actual kidney function as what they need. So I lost half of that kidney function by donating one of my kidneys, but I didn't lose half of my kidney function because the one kidney that I still have is actually growing and taking on more kidney function than what it did on its own before. And I'm going to get back to the majority of the actual kidney function I had before through my one kidney. So that is one thing that is so awesome about this process, is being able to donate my kidney, making a huge difference in the recipient's life, and then going about my life, and nothing has really changed. It is amazing to be able to donate a kidney to help someone while you are still living, while they're still living, make a huge difference in their life. Really nothing or not much changes in my own life. I will say there really is no reward as far as donating my kidney. I didn't receive any money. There's no like award. You get people tell you, hey, man, that's amazing and things like that. But there's no like, you don't get anything out of it other than seeing the person that you donate to, how it changes their quality of life, how appreciative they are, how appreciative their family is. All that sort of stuff makes it 1,000,000% worth it. Totally worth the entire process and everything I've went through. And to hear updates of how my recipient is doing, they're doing very well. Guys, I'm sorry this video went so long. There's so much information, and there's some that I didn't even convey through this video. If you have any more questions about being a living kidney donor, feel free to comment down below. If you are someone who is on the transplant list and waiting for a kidney, I hope and that a match is found for you. Really praying for you and praying for everybody going through this process. This has been a big part of my life this year, big part of my recipient's life going forward. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to hear from anybody with any questions down in the comment section. Hope you guys have a great day. Be praying for you.